Hey everyone, hope you're doing great. Welcome back to my channel. In today's video, we'll dive into what if Deku built an iron empire with his own technology. Smash that subscribe button, and be sure to peek at the description below. Let's begin. The wind on the rooftop was a liar. It whispered of freedom, of soaring heights and endless sky, a cruel mockery to the boy whose feet were cemented to the grimy concrete. Izuku Midoriya's world had shrunk to the space between one heartbeat and the next, each thrum in his chest a painful echo of the words that had just been spoken. All Might's hand, a titan's grip that could shatter steel, rested on his shoulder with a gentleness that was somehow worse than any blow. It was the careful touch of a surgeon delivering a terminal diagnosis. "It's not bad to dream, young man." The hero's voice boomed, though it was softer now, tinged with a pity that felt like acid in Izuku's veins. "But you have to be realistic." The words hung in the air, heavy and absolute. Izuku had asked the question he'd been waiting his whole life to ask, his voice a trembling, hopeful squeak. "Can I be a hero, even without a quirk?" He had laid his soul bare, offering up the fragile, flickering candle of his dream to the sun itself, and the sun had snuffed it out. "Pro-heroes are always laying their lives on the line," All Might continued, his voice a slow, grinding mechanism of logic. "I cannot simply say, you can be a hero even without power." His skeletal form, the secret truth behind the myth, seemed to cast a longer, more ominous shadow in the fading afternoon light. "If you want to help people, there are other ways. You could become a police officer. They get a lot of flack because the villains are caught by heroes, but it's a fine and noble profession." Every word was a perfectly aimed stone, shattering the stained glass cathedral of his lifelong aspiration. Izuku's vision blurred, the cityscape below becoming a watery, indifferent smear of color. His throat was a knot of unshed tears, so tight he couldn't draw a proper breath. He had imagined this moment a million times. In his daydreams, All Might would see his spirit, his analytical mind, and declare that the heart of a hero was more important than any quirk. Reality was a cold, efficient executioner. "It's good to have a dream. Just make sure it's an attainable one." All Might turned, his bony frame moving toward the rooftop door. The clank of the metal was deafening in the sudden silence. He paused, his back to Izuku. "Don't go trying any funny business on the roof, okay? No swan dives." The casual, thoughtless comment was the final twist of the knife. It wasn't meant to be cruel, but it landed with the force of a physical assault, implying that the only logical conclusion for a quirkless boy with a shattered dream was to end it all. The door clicked shut, the sound echoing the final, irrevocable closing of a door in his soul. Izuku stood there for what felt like an eternity, the liar's wind whipping his green-black hair across his face. He didn't cry. The shock was too profound, a numbing cold that had frozen his tears before they could form. He was hollow. An empty vessel where a boundless ocean of hope had once resided. The hero he worshipped, the very symbol of his existence, had looked at the sum of his being, his passion, his intelligence, his desperate, burning need to save people, and had seen nothing of value. He had seen only a fragile, quirkless boy. A liability. Slowly, mechanically, he began the long walk down the stairs and toward home. Each step was a conscious effort, his feet dragging as if wading through setting concrete. The world around him was muted, the vibrant sounds of the city fading into a dull, monotonous drone. He was a ghost haunting the edges of his own life. Then, an explosion ripped through the air. It was a sound he knew viscerally, the kind that always preceded the arrival of heroes. A plume of black smoke billowed into the sky from a shopping district a few blocks away. In the past, his legs would have already been moving, his fanboy heart thrumming with excitement, his notebook clutched in his hand, ready to analyze and adore. Today, he simply stopped. He watched the smoke curl into the sky with dead eyes. What was the point? It was a show he was not, and never would be, allowed to be a part of. But then, a primal, magnetic pull, the ingrained habit of a lifetime, drew him closer. He walked, not with excitement, but with a morbid, detached curiosity. He joined the back of the growing crowd, their murmurs and gasps a distant buzz. The scene was chaos. A slimy, fluid villain, the very same one that had attacked him earlier, the one All Might had supposedly captured, had taken a hostage. Flames licked at the storefronts, The result of the hostage's desperate, uncontrolled explosions. The hostage, with spiky ash-blonde hair and a snarl of furious terror. Kaken. Izuku's breath hitched. His childhood friend, his tormentor, was being suffocated, used as a human puppet by the sludge villain. And the heroes, they were failing. Death Arms was there, his mighty arms useless against a liquid opponent. I can't get a grip on him, he yelled, frustration etched on his face. Kamui Woods was trying to pull civilians back. The fire is my weakness. I can't get close. The newly debuted heroine, Empty Lady, was present but couldn't maneuver in the narrow alleyway. I need at least a 2-lane road to get through here. Backdraft was focused entirely on containing the inferno, his water quirk the only thing preventing the entire block from going up in flames. Izuku watched, and for the first time, he wasn't seeing heroes. He was seeing a dysfunctional system failing in real time. He saw specialized tools without the right problem to solve. He saw a lack of coordination, a critical failure in tactical response. They were powerful, yes, but they were also profoundly inefficient. Their quirks, the very source of their power, were also their greatest limitations. He saw Kaken's eyes, wide with a fear Izuku had never seen in him before. It was the same suffocating terror he himself had felt less than an hour ago. A spark ignited in the hollow cavern of his chest, the familiar, reflexive urge to act. His legs tensed, his muscles screaming the ingrained mantra. A hero's legs move on their own before they have time to think. He took a half step forward, his backpack feeling heavy on his shoulders. He could throw it. Distract the villain? It might give Kaken a second to breathe. It might work. You'd only be a liability. All Might's voice echoed in his mind, a spectral chain that yanked him back. I cannot simply say, you can be a hero even without power. His feet froze, locking to the pavement. The fire in his limbs fizzled and died, doused by the cold water of realism. What could he do? A quirkless, useless Deku. He'd just get in the way. He'd get himself killed. He'd make things worse. His idol had told him so. The number one hero in the world had judged him and found him wanting, so he stood there, paralyzed by the ghost of his shattered dream. He clenched his fists, his fingernails digging so deeply into his palms that they drew blood, the sharp pain a distant anchor in a sea of helplessness. He watched. He analyzed. And he despaired. The minutes stretched into an agonizing eternity. The heroes held the perimeter. The villain suffocated his friend. And Izuku did nothing. Then, a thunderous boom shook the street. A massive figure pushed through the crowd. I really am pathetic. All Might's voice roared. His muscle form returned. He had been there the whole time, weakened and powerless, just another face in the crowd. He'd been standing there, just like Izuku, waiting for someone else to act, with a cry of, Detroit Smash! All Might punched the air. The force was cataclysmic. A tornado of air pressure ripped through the alley, blasting the sludge villain apart and freeing Bakugo. The shockwaves shattered windows up and down the street. The sky itself seemed to buckle, and then, impossibly, it began to rain. He had changed the weather with a single punch. The crowd roared. They cheered for their savior, their symbol. They saw only the victory. Izuku saw something different. He saw the 5-minute delay that could have cost Kaken his life. He saw the immense collateral damage from a single, overwhelming attack. He saw the city's entire safety infrastructure resting on the shoulders of one man who, as Izuku now knew, was a flickering candle in the wind. What if All Might had been too weak? What if he'd been on the other side of the city? What if he hadn't been there at all? The system was not just flawed, it was fragile. It was a house of cards built on an earthquake fault line, and everyone was pretending it was a fortress of stone, as the paramedics checked on Bakugo and the other heroes took credit for securing the area. A profound and terrifying clarity washed over Izuku. The awe was gone, replaced by a cold, sharp-edged understanding. Heroism, as it stood, was a lottery of power. And he had lost before he was even born. The walk home was a funeral procession for a dream. The world had regained its sharp edges, but all the color had been bled out, leaving it in stark, unforgiving shades of gray. His mother met him at the door, her face a mask of worry. She'd seen the news. She hugged him, her relief palpable, and he allowed himself to be held, a mannequin in her arms. He mumbled that he was fine and retreated to his room, closing the door behind him. The room was a shrine. A monument to a god who had just told him he was unworthy of entering the temple. All Might was everywhere. Posters of his grinning face adorned every wall. Action figures and dynamic poses lined his shelves. His bedsheets, his alarm clock, his pencil case all bore the iconic, primary colored emblem of the symbol of peace. For years, this room had been his sanctuary, a fortress of hope. Now, it was a prison. Each smiling image was a warden, its grin a mocking sneer. He sat on his chair, the silence of the room pressing in on him. He could still hear the cheering crowd, feel the cold wind on the rooftop, see the terror in Kakin's eyes. He had done nothing. He was nothing. He replayed the video on his computer, the one he had watched thousands of times. A younger All Might saving hundreds from a disaster, his triumphant laugh echoing as he carried people from the rubble. "I am here!" Izuku's hands began to shake. A single, hot tear traced a path down his cheek. Then another. Soon, a quiet sob escaped his lips, then a gut-wrenching wail of pure, undiluted grief. He slumped forward, his head on his desk, and wept for the boy he had been, for the future that had been stolen from him. He cried until his throat was raw and his eyes were swollen, until there was nothing left inside but a vast, aching emptiness. But in that void something new began to stir. It wasn't hope. It was something harder, colder. It was rage. It was a quiet, simmering fury not at all Might the man who was, after all, just a fallible person trying his best but at the lie. The lie of the system. The lie that only those born with power could be saviors. The lie that had paralyzed him and nearly gotten his friend killed. His eyes, red-rimmed and raw, drifted to the poster directly in front of him. All Might, fists raised to the sky. Slogan, "You can be a hero!" With a guttural cry, Izuku shot up from his chair. His hand shot out, grabbing the corner of the poster. The sound of tearing paper was a gunshot in the silent room. He ripped it from the wall, then tore the glossy image in two, then four, letting the pieces flutter to the floor like dead leaves. It was a dam breaking. He moved through the room with a feverish energy. He swept the action figures from their shelves, the clatter of cheap plastic a discordant symphony of his disillusionment. He ripped the All Might themed duvet from his bed, flinging it into a corner. He tore down every poster, every clipping, every last piece of memorabilia that represented the dream that had been so cruelly executed. He wasn't destroying his idol. He was dismantling the pedestal. He was clearing the altar of a false religion. When he was done, he stood panting in the center of the room, a wasteland of his former life surrounding him. The walls were bare, scarred with torn tape and faded outlines. The room was no longer a shrine. It was just a room. Empty. Ready for something new. His gaze fell upon his desk, upon the neat stack of notebooks. Hero Analysis for the Future, Volume 13. He picked it up, his fingers tracing the familiar, childish handwriting. He flipped through the pages. Detailed sketches of heroes, analysis of their quirks, their strengths, their weaknesses, their fighting styles. Kamui Woods, vulnerable to fire. Lacks maneuverability in dense environments. Empty lady, power is useless in confined spaces. High potential for collateral damage. Death arms, purely physical. No ranged options. Ineffective against non-solid or fluid opponents. His analysis had always been there. He had seen the flaws, but he had seen them through the adoring eyes of a fan. He'd framed them as interesting trivia, as puzzles for the heroes to overcome. He had never seen them for what they were, critical, systemic vulnerabilities. He put the notebook down and took a fresh one from his backpack. He opened it to the first pristine, white page. For a long moment, he just stared at it. The pen in his hand felt unnaturally heavy. He was standing at a precipice, the path behind him a smoking ruin. The path forward was a blank, terrifying unknown. With a deep, shuddering breath, he put pen to paper. He did not write Hero Analysis for the Future, Volume 14. Instead, in sharp, angular letters, a stark contrast to his usual looping scrawl, he wrote a new title. Systemic Flaws in Modern Heroics, Volume 1. The words looked alien on the page, but they felt right. They felt true. A torrent of thoughts, observations, and frustrations that had been building for years, that had crystallized in the alleyway watching the heroes fail, now poured out of him. He wrote with a furious, desperate energy, his pen scratching aggressively across the page. He didn't just list flaws, he categorized them. High over-reliance on high-tier individuals, the all-might problem, symptom. The entire hero ecosystem and public morale is dependent on a handful of top-ranked heroes. Vulnerability, the injury, death, or absence of one of these individuals creates a catastrophic power vacuum, e.g., All Might's time limit. Observed incident, sludge villain capture. All Might's presence was the sole determining factor for success. 2. Quirk specialization versus situational versatility. Symptom, most heroes are hyper-specialized. Their effectiveness plummets outside of ideal conditions. Vulnerability, a villain with a specific quirk or a hostile environment can neutralize multiple heroes simultaneously. Observed incident, Kamui Woods, fire, empty lady, space, death arms, liquid form, all rendered ineffective. 3. Information and communication breakdown. Symptom, on-site response is often chaotic. Information relayed between heroes, police, and emergency services is slow and inefficient. Vulnerability leads to poor tactical decisions, delayed response times, and increased risk to civilians and heroes. 4. Reactive versus proactive methodology. Symptom, heroics is almost entirely reactive. Heroes respond to villain attacks after they have occurred. Vulnerability, significant damage to property, and loss of life is incurred before the situation is even addressed. He filled page after page, his mind a whirlwind of data and logic. The sun began to set, casting long shadows across his room, but he didn't notice. His mother knocked on the door to offer him dinner, but he waved her away with a mumbled excuse. The grief was gone. The rage had cooled. All that remained was a core of cold, diamond-hard resolve. Analysis was not enough. Identifying problems was not enough. A true hero didn't just point out what was broken. A true hero fixed it. He turned to a new page. At the top, he wrote, Solutions Applied Technology. For every problem, he would design a solution. He would not be limited by the flesh, by the genetic lottery he had lost. His mind would be his quirk. Engineering would be his superpower. His pen began to move again, but this time, he wasn't writing words. He was sketching. Problem, lack of reconnaissance and situational awareness. Solution, unmanned aerial drones. He drew a small, quad-rotor drone, smaller than a dinner plate. He labeled its components: high-resolution optical zoom, thermal imaging sensors, acoustic dampeners for silent flight, encrypted short-burst data transmission. He called it the Watcher 1. It would be the hero's eyes seeing where they could not. Problem, ineffective capture of non-solid or resilient villains. Solution, multiphasic non-lethal containment ordnance. He sketched a device that looked like a grenade. He designed it to have 3 functions, selectable via a dial. 1. A rapidly expanding, high-tensile foam to immobilize and suffocate. 2. A high-voltage electromagnetic pulse net to short out cybernetics or stun biological targets. 3. An aerosolized fast-acting sedative for crowd control or de-escalation. Problem, reactive methodology. This was the biggest challenge. How do you stop a crime before it starts? His mind raced, connecting disparate fields of knowledge from years of obsessive online research. Data analysis, pattern recognition, machine learning. Solution, Predictive Incident Mapping System, PIMS. He began to outline a software architecture. It would need to scrape and analyze vast amounts of data in real time: police reports, social media chatter, traffic patterns, public infrastructure schematics, sewer and subway systems, even weather forecasts. The AI would learn to recognize the subtle patterns that preceded villain attacks, creating a probability map of potential hotspots. It would turn a city's data stream into a crystal ball. He worked through the night, fueled by a terrifying, exhilarating clarity. The world had told him he couldn't be a hero in their system. Fine. He would build a new one. A better one. A system built on logic, efficiency, and technology, where the strength of a person's mind mattered more than the strength of their fists. A system designed to save everyone, not just the ones lucky enough to be near a hero with the right quirk. The first rays of dawn crept through his window, illuminating the carnage of his old life and the blueprints of his new one. Izuku Midoriya stood amidst the wreckage, his eyes burning from lack of sleep, his fingers stained with ink. He looked at his schematics, at the complex equations and elegant designs that covered his desk. He was no longer the trembling, tearful boy on the rooftop. That boy had died yesterday. In his place stood something new. He was not a hero in waiting. He was a builder. A creator. An architect. He picked up a piece of a torn All Might poster from the floor. He looked at the torn, smiling face, the symbol of an age he would now render obsolete. "You were wrong, All Might," he whispered, his voice a low, steady rasp. "You don't need a quirk to be a hero." He let the piece of paper fall from his fingers. "You need a better system. 2 years can be a lifetime. For some, it is a period of gentle growth, of incremental changes that are only noticeable in retrospect." For Izuku Midoriya, it was a metamorphic crucible. He had entered the fire as a boy made of fragile hope and brittle dreams. He was emerging as something else entirely, forged in the cool, logical flame of his own intellect. The room was no longer just a bedroom. It was a command center, a laboratory, a forge. The scarred, empty walls of 2 years prior were now hidden behind a constellation of glowing monitors and whiteboards covered in a spiderweb of complex equations and wiring diagrams. 3 high-end computers, salvaged and rebuilt by his own hands, hummed in a steady, reassuring chorus, their combined processing power dedicated to a single, monumental task. The air, thick with the scent of ozone, hot solder, and the bitter aroma of stale, black coffee, was the only atmosphere he truly felt comfortable breathing anymore. Izuku sat in the center of this technological nexus, his posture a study in focused intensity. His face had lost its boyish roundness, replaced by the sharp angles of someone who often forgot to eat, who substituted sleep for intellectual pursuit. His green eyes, once wide with hero worship, were now narrowed, scanning lines of code scrolling across the main monitor. They were quicker, sharper, and held a glint of something that could be mistaken for cynicism but was, in fact, a relentless, all-consuming pragmatism. The UA High School entrance exam had come and gone without his participation. While his mother had been quietly heartbroken, she had also been relieved. The thought of her quirkless son throwing himself into the meat grinder of the hero course had been a source of constant, gnawing anxiety for her. When Izuku had announced his intention to apply for the technology and engineering program at the prestigious CI Academy, a school known for producing Japan's top engineers and inventors, she had cried with a confusing mixture of sorrow for his lost dream and relief for his newfound safety. He had, of course, aced the exams. CI's curriculum was rigorous, demanding, and utterly perfect for him. It gave him access to tools and knowledge he could only dream of, and it surrounded him with minds that, while not as driven as his own, at least spoke the same language of physics and code. He was a quiet, almost invisible student, known for his perfect test scores and his complete lack of a social life. His classmates saw him as an enigma. His teachers saw him as a prodigy. None of them knew what he did when he went home. On the central screen, a complex, three-dimensional model of the city of Muzidafu was rendered in glowing blue lines. Superimposed on this were shifting heat maps of crimson and orange. This was the nascent mind of his AI, a program he had built from scratch. He'd named it Allsight. It was his solution to the problem of reactive heroics. Every day, Allsight scraped and cross-referenced terabytes of data, police scanners, traffic reports, social media keywords, infrastructure vulnerabilities, even historical villain attack patterns. It was learning, growing, seeking the ghost of a signal in the noise, trying to predict the next fire before the first spark was ever struck. Beside him on a reinforced workbench sat the physical manifestation of his work. The Watcher 1 drone was a marvel of compact engineering. Its carbon fiber frame was matte black, designed to absorb light, and its quadrotors were fitted with custom-built magnetic dampeners that made it nearly silent below 20 meters. It was the culmination of 18 months of design, failure, and painstaking iteration. This entire operation was not cheap. CI's tuition was steep, and the components he used were often military grade. His mother's salary as a nurse could never cover it. So, Izuku had created a second identity. Online, he was known only as Deadless. As Deadless, he was a legendary figure in the fiercely competitive world of corporate cybersecurity and white-hat hacking. He entered high-stakes programming competitions with million-yen prizes, and he won. He took on freelance contracts, finding and patching vulnerabilities in the systems of powerful corporations for exorbitant fees. He'd even anonymously patented a few minor software algorithms through a third-party legal firm, creating a small but steady stream of passive income. Deadless was a ghost, a myth in the machine, and he was the sole financier of Izuku Midoriya's secret war. A soft chime drew his attention to a side monitor. Allsight was flagging a notification. Not a villain alert, but an event reminder: Kanto Regional Tech Advancement Expo. Today, 10 to 1800 hours. Kakusai Tenjiho Hall. He let out a sigh. He had no time for expos. They were spectacles, marketing circuses for corporations to show off marginally improved consumer goods. But this one was different. It had a dedicated student innovation wing. More importantly, several high-end component manufacturers were listed as vendors. He needed a new microgyroscope for his next drone prototype, the Watcher 2, one with a higher tolerance for G-force than anything he could build or order legally online. An expo was the perfect place to acquire such a thing, or at least to network with someone who could. With the reluctance of a hermit being forced from his cave, Izuku saved his work, powered down the non-essential systems, and stood up, his joints popping in protest. He changed out of his grease-stained work shirt into a plain black hoodie and jeans, the unofficial uniform of a boy trying to be invisible. He grabbed a worn backpack containing a high-spec tablet, a portable power bank, and a wallet containing a carefully budgeted amount of cash. As he left, he paused at the door, giving his workshop one last look. It was his entire world. His armory. His empire of one. And it was not enough. He was hitting the limits of what he could create alone. He had the vision, the strategy, the software. But his hardware, his physical creations, were bottlenecked by his own two hands. He needed more. He needed a spark. The Kakusai Tenjiho Expo Hall was a cacophony of controlled chaos. The air hummed with the sound of 1,000 conversations, the whir of servomotors, and the polished, upbeat music pumped through the convention center's sound system. Sleek corporate booths with holographic displays and smiling representatives hawked everything from next-generation support gear to smart home technology that promised to toast your bread with military precision. Izuku navigated the crowd with practiced anonymity, his hood pulled up, his eyes scanning everything. He felt a familiar pang of disgust at the commercialization of it all. Hero support gear was marketed like sports equipment, with flashy colors and celebrity hero endorsements. It was about branding, not efficiency. He saw a display for a new type of capture foam that came in 5 different heroic colors. It was absurd. Functionality was being sacrificed at the altar of marketability. He made his way toward the Student Innovation Wing, a slightly less polished and far more chaotic section of the hall. Here, the corporate sheen gave way to the raw, unbridled energy of creation. The booths were smaller, messier, manned by nervous-looking university and high school students standing proudly beside their inventions. Most were derivative or impractical: a toaster that could launch toast into your mouth, a helmet that translated dog barks into generic, unhelpful phrases. Then he heard it. An explosion. It wasn't a villain attack. It was too small, too contained, and was followed not by screams, but by a collective groan of exasperation from the surrounding booths. Izuku's curiosity piqued. He moved toward the source of the noise. There, in a booth that looked less like a presentation and more like the recent scene of a natural disaster, was a girl. She was covered in soot, her bright pink hair a tangled, chaotic mess held back by a pair of steampunk-esque goggles pushed up onto her forehead. Her face, smudged with grease, was alight with a manic, unquenchable enthusiasm. Her yellow eyes, with their unique crosshair-shaped pupils, were focused with laser intensity on a large, smoking metal boot. Whoa! The kinetic energy output on Baby 37 was a little higher than calculated. The recoil dampeners need a serious upgrade, she chirped to no one in particular, her voice a buoyant, high-pitched stream of technical jargon. The sign above her booth, hanging slightly askew, read, May Hatsum Yui support course, building the future, one adorable baby at a time. Izuku stopped. Yui. He felt a faint, phantom ache of his old dream, but it was quickly replaced by analytical curiosity. He watched her. She wasn't trying to sell anything. She was simply, joyfully, inventing, right here in the middle of the expo floor. Her booth was a cluttered treasure trove of half-finished projects. There were grapple hooks, hydraulic wire shooters, jet propulsion systems, and dozens of other devices he couldn't immediately identify. They were all brilliant. And they were all flawed. He could see it instantly. Her creations were monuments to raw power and innovation, but they lacked refinement, control, and a clear purpose. Her jet boots could probably punch a hole through a concrete wall, but they had no navigation system or stabilization. Her high-tension wires could likely restrain a charging rhinoceros, but the launcher was heavy, unwieldy, and had a kickback that would shatter an ordinary person's arm. She was a genius artisan, but she wasn't an engineer. She built incredible components, not integrated systems. He watched for 10 minutes as she tinkered, completely oblivious to the world around her. She was a force of nature, a whirlwind of creation. And in that whirlwind, Izuku saw the missing piece of his puzzle. He saw the spark his forge desperately needed. Taking a steadying breath, he walked up to the booth. "Excuse me," he said, his voice quiet but clear. May didn't look up. "Can't talk right now. I'm on the verge of a breakthrough with my integrated shock absorption system for Baby 42. It's gonna be a game changer. Your propulsion systems have an energy-to-thrust conversion ratio of nearly 80%, Izuku stated, cutting through her monologue. That's unheard of with commercially available power cells. That got her attention. She finally looked up from her work, her crosshair eyes focusing on him, scanning him with an unnerving intensity. "You can tell that just by looking? I can see the plasma injector design and the magnetic containment field emitters," he replied, pointing at one of her jet boots. "It's an incredibly efficient, if volatile, design, but your power regulation is unstable. The fluctuations would cause catastrophic failure after less than 5 minutes of sustained use." May's jaw dropped slightly. He wasn't a customer or a judge. He wasn't asking what her inventions did. He was telling her how they worked and why they would fail. "And your wire launchers," he continued, gesturing to another device. "The tensile strength of the polymer you're using must be off the charts, but the launch mechanism is purely mechanical. It relies on compressed springs. It's too slow, too loud, and the recoil is a critical design flaw. You're prioritizing power over precision and usability." He wasn't trying to be insulting. He was simply stating facts. He was analyzing. May, however, didn't look insulted. A slow, wide grin spread across her face, a look of pure, unadulterated delight. You get it!" she exclaimed, slamming a wrench down on her workbench. "Everyone else just says ooh shiny, or is this safe? You see my babies for what they really are." "Who are you?" "My name isn't important," Izuku said, deflecting. He pulled his tablet from his backpack and swiped it on, bringing up a complex schematic. It was a design he had been working on for months, a system he lacked the materials and machinery to build himself. "I have a design for a magnetic accelerator-based launch system. It would be silent, have zero recoil, and could vary the projectile velocity with millisecond precision. It would make your wire launcher 300% more effective." He turned the tablet toward her. May leaned in, her strange eyes dilating as she took in the design. Her manic grin faded, replaced by an expression of profound, almost religious reverence. She zoomed in on the power conduit diagrams, her fingers tracing the lines on the screen. This is beautiful," she breathed. "The nested capacitor banks, the sequential power discharge. It's perfect. It solves the energy bottleneck problem I've been stuck on for months, but the materials required for the magnetic rails, and the processing power for the targeting system, you couldn't build this in a high school lab." "No," Izuku agreed. "You couldn't." He swiped to another screen, showing a design for an integrated flight and navigation package for a drone. "Your propulsion tech, combined with my stabilization and predictive guidance software, could create a reconnaissance unit with unparalleled speed and maneuverability." May looked up from the tablet, her eyes boring into his. For the first time, she seemed to see the boy behind the analysis, the intense, burning intelligence in his gaze. "You're not just a critic," she said, a new level of respect in her voice. "You're a builder. You have the vision. I just make the parts." "You make the best parts I've ever seen," Izuku replied, and it was the most genuine compliment he had given anyone in 2 years. "But they're just parts. I design systems. Together, we could build something that actually works." The implication hung in the air between them. It wasn't an offer of friendship. It was a proposal for a partnership, a fusion of intellect and raw talent. May's grin returned, wider and more brilliant than before. It was the look of a pyromaniac who had just been handed a book of matches and the keys to a fireworks factory. "Show me your workshop," she demanded, already starting to pack some of her smaller, more portable babies into a large duffel bag. "If you've got the brains to design this stuff, I want to see the forge you're working in." "My name's Mayhatsum, by the way. Izuku Midoriya," he said, the name feeling strange on his tongue after 2 years of living as a ghost. The partnership was born, not with a handshake, but with the mutual recognition of genius. May's reaction to his workshop was everything Izuku could have hoped for. When she stepped into his room, her eyes went wide, and she let out a low whistle of appreciation. She completely ignored the Spartan nature of his living space, the mattress on the floor, the lack of any personal effects, and zoned in on the technology. "Whoa, Mama!" she yelled, dropping her bag and rushing over to his computer setup. "Triple-core parallel processing with a liquid cooling system you built yourself? And is that a dedicated server rack?" She peered at the all-site interface. "And what is this beautiful data analysis program? Did you write this yourself?" "The heuristic algorithm is gorgeous." For the next hour, they didn't talk. They communicated in the shared language of technology. She showed him her babies, and he showed her his systems. He was in awe of her intuitive grasp of mechanics and materials science. She was floored by the elegance and complexity of his software and strategic designs. It was like two halves of the same brain had finally found each other. "Okay, Mido-kun," she said, bestowing a nickname on him without a hint of irony. "Your Watcher 1 drone is cute, a real good boy, but his propulsion is weak sauce. Let me give him a little upgrade." Before Izuku could protest, she had pulled one of her compact jet propulsion units from her bag and was already disassembling the drone's rotor mounts. She worked with a frantic, chaotic-seeming energy that was nonetheless incredibly precise. Within 20 minutes she had retrofitted her own superior motor into the drone's frame, reinforcing the housing and integrating it with his power system. "There," she declared, holding it up. "Baby 52, the Midoriya Hatsum special. Now he's got some real get up and go." As Izuku ran a systems diagnostic, impressed by the seamless integration she had achieved, a sharp, insistent alert pinged from Allsite. He turned to the main monitor. A red circle had appeared on the city map, flashing over a commercial side street a few kilometers away. Probability alert, 78%. Event type, mugging/theft, low level. Keyword clusters, help, my bag, stop him, source from social media uploads. Police response, 4-minute EST. His heart hammered in his chest. It was one thing to run simulations. It was another to see a live event, predicted and verified by his system. 4 minutes. That was an eternity for the victim. He looked at the newly upgraded drone on the workbench. He looked at May, who was watching the screen with rapt attention. The plan had always been to perfect the technology, to build the entire system, and then, what? Sell it? Give it to the heroes who had failed, who had scorned him. He'd never fully worked out the deployment phase. It had always seemed so far away, but here was a chance. A small one. A low-stakes, real-world test. An impulse, a ghost of the boy who had tried to run into danger for Kaken, surged through him. But this time, it wasn't reckless. It was calculated. "Hatsum-san," he said, his voice steady. "How quickly can you get a live video feed from the drone patched to my tablet?" May's eyes lit up with understanding. "Give me 30 seconds. The decision was made. Izuku slid open his window, the cool evening air rushing in. He placed the upgraded Watcher drone on the sill. On his screen, he plotted a course, the AI highlighting the fastest, most discreet route. Watcher 2.0, launching, he said, the designation feeling right. He tapped a command on his keyboard. With a barely audible whir, the drone lifted into the air and shot off into the night sky with a speed that the original could have never achieved. Oh yeah! Look at my baby fly! May cheered, already working furiously to sync the data streams. A moment later, a crisp, stable image appeared on his tablet, a bird's-eye view of the city streets. Izuku became the commander. Give me thermal imaging. Overlay it with the city grid. The view on the tablet shifted, the world turning into a landscape of heat signatures. He guided the drone, his fingers flying across the screen, his mind processing the tactical data with inhuman speed. 2 minutes had passed. Police were still 2 minutes out. There, he muttered, spotting them. 2 heat signatures in an alley. One larger, running away. One smaller, huddled on the ground. A purse snatching. All sight was correct. He's heading west, toward the train station. He'll be lost in the crowd in 90 seconds, Izuku analyzed. We need to stop him now. How? May asked, her usual manic energy focused into a sharp point of curiosity. We can't exactly shoot him. We won't have to, Izuku said. He pulled a small, gray sphere from a drawer. It was one of his containment grenades, the prototype he'd sketched out 2 years ago. He'd spent 6 months perfecting the chemical compound for the foam. His plan had a flaw, though. The drone was just an eye in the sky. It couldn't deploy the grenade. Hatsum-san, I need a delivery system. Now, he didn't need to say more. She saw the grenade, saw the drone's live feed, and her mind made the connection in an instant. She grabbed a small electromagnetic clamp from her box of wonders and a soldering iron. Get the drone back here. Rooftop. Quick! She ordered. Izuku redirected the drone, sending it streaking back toward his apartment building. He met May on the roof, grenade in hand. With the skill of a bomb disposal expert, she soldered the clamp to the drone's undercarriage and rigged it to a remote release signal he could activate from his tablet. The entire modification took less than 40 seconds. He's getting away, she urged. The drone shot off the roof again, the grenade held tight in the clamp. Izuku watched on his tablet, his mind a blur of calculations: wind speed, target velocity, trajectory. The running figure was just about to emerge from the alley onto a main street. Okay, Watcher, dropping the package in 3, 2, 1, he tapped the screen. The clamp released. The grenade fell, a silent, gray teardrop in the night. It landed with a soft thump 5 feet in front of the running mugger. A fraction of a second later, it hissed and erupted, spewing a massive, impossibly fast wave of thick, white foam. The mugger, caught completely by surprise, ran straight into it. The foam instantly enveloped his legs, hardening on contact with the air. He tripped, falling face first into the rapidly expanding mound, which solidified around him, pinning him to the ground in a harmless, but completely inescapable, cocoon. He was immobilized from the neck down. On the tablet, Izuku saw the victim peek out of the alley, her eyes wide with disbelief. The drone, its mission complete, ascended to a higher altitude, becoming just another shadow in the night sky. A wide, trembling grin stretched across Izuku's face. His breath came in ragged gasps, his heart pounding with a feeling he hadn't experienced in years. It wasn't the second-hand thrill of watching a hero. It was the white-hot, electrifying rush of personal victory. Of success. He took out his phone, used a voice scrambler and a number spoofer tools of Deadless and dialed the police emergency line. There is a successful citizen's arrest of a purse snatcher in the alley off of Chodori Street, near the station, his disguised, robotic voice said. The suspect is immobilized and awaiting pickup. The victim is safe. He hung up before they could respond. He looked over at May. Her goggles were perched on her forehead, her face was smudged with grease and soot, and she was vibrating with pure, unadulterated adrenaline. That, she breathed, her crosshair eyes gleaming in the moonlight, was the most beautiful, most amazing, most incredible thing I have ever seen. My babies, they did it! They actually saved someone. Izuku looked out at the city, at the distant flashing lights of the approaching police cars. He had done it. Quirkless, useless Deku. He had seen a crime in progress, formulated a plan, deployed a tactical unit, and neutralized the threat with zero collateral damage, all from the safety of his home. He hadn't thrown a single punch. He hadn't put himself in danger. He had used his mind, his technology. He had been a hero. On his own terms. The rush was intoxicating. It was proof. It worked. And it was only the beginning. The night air of Muzidifu was a complex symphony of data streams. To the average citizen, it was just the ambient hum of a city that never slept. To Izuku Midoriya, it was an open book. From the command chair in his bedroom, a throne of wires and processing power, he read the city's story through the eyes of his machines. Watcher 3 is in position on the south perimeter. He spoke into a small, high-fidelity microphone, his voice a low, steady murmur. Watcher 4, maintain overwatch at 100 meters. I want a full thermal and network scan of the target building. Hatsum, how's the power consumption on 3's new acoustic dampeners? From across the room, where she was practically vibrating with excitement in her own cobbled-together workstation, came Mei Hatsum's cheerful reply. Power draw is nominal, architect. My new babies are purring like kittens in a sunbeam. We could hover for another 6 hours easy. Aren't they adorable? Izuku allowed a small, rare smile. In the 6 months since their fateful meeting at the Tech Expo, their partnership had evolved into a ruthlessly efficient symbiosis. He was the architect, the grand strategist who saw the whole board. She was the spark, the master artisan who forged the pieces with an intuitive genius that bordered on supernatural. His bedroom had expanded its technological footprint, spilling out into the living room, much to his mother's bewildered acceptance. They now operated a fleet of 6 Watcher series drones, each one a significant upgrade from the last, packed with Mei's increasingly brilliant and compact. Babies, tonight's operation was their most complex yet. Allsight had flagged a silent alarm tripped within a private data storage facility, a company that handled secure backups for several small financial institutions. The police had been alerted, but their response time was estimated at 7 minutes. The perpetrators, however, were not common thugs. They were cutting through the facility's digital and physical security with a precision that screamed professional. They're not just robbing the place, Izuku murmured, his eyes flicking between a dozen windows on his main monitor. They're attempting a deep system data transfer. I'm piggybacking their Wi-Fi signal now. Daedalus is in. His fingers flew across the keyboard, his online persona granting him access to the facility's compromised network. He could see what they were after, encrypted client ledgers. Blackmail material. Okay, Spark, I need a distraction at the west entrance. Activate Watcher 2's sonic pulse. Low frequency. Just enough to rattle their teeth. You got it! My little screamer is gonna sing them a lullaby. On one of his monitors, a live feed showed the dark hallway of the facility. A moment later, a deep, inaudible hum filled the air, causing the camera to vibrate. 2 figures in tactical gear flinched, grabbing their heads. It was the window Izuku needed. Their comms are scrambled. I'm deploying the containment units. With a few keystrokes, he maneuvered Watcher 3 and Watcher 5 through the ventilation shafts he mapped from the building's blueprints. They emerged silently from ceiling vents above the unsuspecting intruders. Deployment on my mark. 3, 2, 1. Mark. 2 silent thunks echoed in the facility. 2 of his custom foam grenades hit the floor. The world on his monitor dissolved into a sea of white as the high-tensile foam erupted, instantly incapacitating the 2 data thieves, pinning them to the floor in hardened cocoons. A third figure, the lookout, bolted for the exit. He's running! Don't let him get away! Mei shouted. He's not going anywhere, Izuku said calmly. He tracked the runner with Watcher 4, the drone's thermal camera painting the man in stark oranges and reds against the cool blue of the night. The man was fast, but he was predictable. He was running toward the rooftop access ladder. Izuku guided Watcher 1, which was carrying a different kind of payload. As the thief burst onto the roof, he was met with the sight of a small, dark drone hovering silently in his path. Before he could even process what he was seeing, the drone emitted a crackle of blue energy. A weighted net, woven with EMP filaments, shot out and enveloped him. He collapsed, his muscles seizing from the low-voltage shock, completely immobilized. The entire engagement had lasted 47 seconds. No alarms raised, no shots fired, no property damage beyond a single server port. The police would arrive to find 3 neatly packaged criminals and a mystery. Operation complete, Izuku said, leaning back in his chair, a wave of adrenaline-laced satisfaction washing over him. As he began routing the drones back, he initiated the final part of their protocol. From the facility's own servers, he sent an anonymous tip to a trusted investigative journalist, along with an encrypted data packet containing the security footage of the incident and a full, detached analysis of the criminals' methods and the security system's vulnerabilities. It was their calling card. A small, elegant piece of code embedded in the file's metadata served as a digital signature, a ghost fingerprint. Their work was getting noticed. Small news blogs and online forums were buzzing with stories of the ghost of Midoria. He was a modern urban legend, a technological phantom who seemed to be one step ahead of the criminals, leaving them gift-wrapped for the authorities. Some praised the ghost as a new kind of hero. Others decried the rise of an unchecked surveillance vigilante. Izuku didn't care about the praise or the condemnation. All that mattered were the results. People were safer. The system was working. He just had no idea how far the ripples of his work had already spread. Thousands of kilometers away, on the hyper-advanced, man-made marvel known as Island, another pair of eyes stared at a monitor. The lab was a world away from Izuku's cluttered workshop. It was a cathedral of gleaming chrome and holographic interfaces, a place where the future was being built every single day. Melissa Shield, her blonde hair tied back in a practical ponytail, leaned forward, her brow furrowed in concentration. On the screen was the same data packet Izuku had just released. "Dad, you need to see this," she said, her voice filled with a mixture of disbelief and excitement. David Shield, a brilliant scientist and All Might's former partner, walked over, peering at the screen over his daughter's shoulder. "What is it, Melissa?" "Another of your pet projects? It's the ghost of Midoria," she explained, pointing to a section of the code. "This is the 6th incident in 2 months. Look at this metadata signature. It's not just a tag. It's a non-repeating cryptographic key generated by a quantum logic algorithm. The math behind this it's a decade ahead of anything we're developing." David looked impressed. "That is elegant. But what's so special about this vigilante? There have been tech-based vigilantes before, not like this," Melissa insisted, pulling up the incident analysis from the packet. "Look. He or she doesn't just stop the crime. They provide a full post-mortem. Flaws in the police response time, vulnerabilities in the building's security, even a predictive model of the criminal's escape routes with a 98% accuracy rating. They aren't just fighting crime, they're treating the city like a single, massive engineering problem. And they're solving it." Melissa, like Izuku, was quirkless. She had grown up in a world saturated by incredible power, surrounded by heroes who could level city blocks. But she, more than anyone, understood that quirks were not the only answer. Her life's work, like her father's, was dedicated to creating technology that could bridge the gap, that could support and enhance heroism. But this ghost, this was different. This wasn't support. This was a whole new paradigm. This was a quirkless individual, she was almost certain of it, outthinking and outperforming pro-heroes through sheer intellect. "I've been tracking the ghost's digital signature," she said, her fingers dancing across a holographic keyboard, bringing up a star chart of interconnected data points. "He's a ghost, all right," bounces his signal through a dozen shell corporations and dead-end servers across the globe. But this last packet, he got arrogant. Or maybe he was leaving a breadcrumb for someone like us to find. She isolated a single thread of data. He used a proprietary compression algorithm. It's brilliant, reduces file size by an extra 60%, and a patent for a similar, much simpler version of this algorithm was filed 18 months ago by a third-party firm on behalf of an anonymous client. David's eyebrows shot up. "You can't be serious. The patent was funded by prize money from a series of international programming competitions," Melissa continued, her voice quickening as she closed in on her quarry. "All won by an entrant known only as Deadless." The name hung in the air. Deadless was a legend in the cybersecurity world, a prodigy spoken of in hushed, reverent tones. No one knew who he was or where he was from. Tracing Daedalus is impossible, David said, shaking his head. We've tried. The best intelligence agencies in the world have tried. They were looking for a master criminal or a state-sponsored agent, Alyssa countered. They weren't looking for a kid in his bedroom. I cross-referenced the patent's initial funding deposit with the geographic location of the ghost's activities. I ran a search for individuals under 20 in Yuzurifu who have excelled in STEM fields but showed no interest in traditional hero courses. A single file appeared on the screen. It was a student profile from CI Academy. Name, Izuku Midoriya. Quirk, none. Melissa stared at the picture of the green-haired, freckled boy. His eyes, even in the bland student ID photo, held a startling intensity. It all clicked into place. The drive, the genius, the anonymity. It was the story of a brilliant mind denied a place in the sun, so he had decided to build his own solar system in the shadows. He's not a vigilante, Dad, she whispered, a profound sense of kinship washing over her. He's a revolutionary. She knew she had to contact him. But approaching a paranoid genius like Daedalus was like trying to corner a phantom. A direct approach would be met with a wall of firewalls and a swift disappearance. She had to offer him something he couldn't get anywhere else. Something he desperately needed. She looked around her lab, at the limitless resources of SHIELD Industries, at the bleeding-edge technology that was years ahead of the public sector. She could offer him a forge worthy of his intellect. 2 days later, Izuku was running a diagnostic on AllSight when a new alert appeared on his screen. It wasn't a crime probability or a system error. It was an incoming message. That, in itself, was impossible. His network was a closed loop, an impenetrable digital fortress. No one got in. The message hadn't come through any conventional channel. It had materialized directly within his system's core, bypassing every firewall and security protocol he had painstakingly constructed. It was like finding a handwritten letter inside a locked safe. His blood ran cold. He was compromised. His hands flew to the keyboard, ready to initiate a full system wipe, to burn his entire digital existence to the ground. May, sensing his sudden panic, rushed over. Architect? What is it? Are we hacked? I don't know, he gritted out. It's elegant. No brute force. It's like it has its own key. He cautiously opened the message file in a secure, isolated sandbox. It was a simple text file. To Daedalus, your work is commendable. Your quantum logic key is a thing of beauty. As is your compression algorithm. You treat heroism not as a battle, but as an engineering problem. You and I see the world in the same way. I am not your enemy. I am an admirer. More than that, I am a potential partner. You are hitting the limits of what you can build in your workshop. Your materials are consumer grade, your fabrication capabilities are restricted. Your vision is limitless, but your resources are not. I can provide those resources. Funding. R&D facilities. Access to technology that is not yet public. Legitimacy. If you are interested in moving out of the shadows and into the future, open the encrypted media file attached. It contains a one-time use link to a secure, virtual meeting space. I will be waiting tomorrow at 2000 hours Japan Standard Time. The world needs more than ghosts. It needs architects. S. Izuku stared at the screen, his mind reeling. S? Who was S? And how did they know so much? They knew his methods, his limitations. The final line sent a chill down his spine. Architects. The name he and May used only between themselves. Were they being watched? Listened to? It's a trap, he said immediately, his voice flat. They're trying to bait us. HPSC maybe. The Hero Public Safety Commission would love to get their hands on an unsanctioned vigilante operating with this level of sophistication. May peered at the screen, her crosshair eyes narrowed. I dunno, Mido-kun. A trap seems loud. This feels different. It's respectful. And they're right, you know. We're building supercars out of junkyard parts. Imagine what we could do with a Rio garage. Her boundless optimism was both a comfort and a liability. But she had a point. He was pushing the boundaries of what he could achieve. His drones were fast, but he needed materials that could withstand higher G-forces. His power cells were efficient, but he needed a higher density energy source. He was a master chef with a single, dull knife and a cold stovetop. For the rest of the day, he dedicated his full processing power, and that of Daedalus, to analyzing the message. He found no viruses, no trackers, no malware of any kind. The attached media file was a masterpiece of encryption, a puzzle box wrapped in a riddle. It took him 14 hours of non-stop work to crack it, and by the end, he was more impressed than scared. Whoever S was, they were on his level. Maybe even above it. At 19:55 the next evening, Izuku sat before his monitor, a lightweight VR headset on his desk. Mei stood behind him, a reassuring hand on his shoulder. "You ready to meet the wizard behind the curtain?" she asked. "No," he said honestly. "But we don't have a choice. We need to know who this is." He put on the headset. The world dissolved, replaced by a clean, minimalist virtual space. It was a simple room, rendered in shades of white and gray, with a single table and 2 chairs. Sitting in one of the chairs was an avatar, a simple, featureless humanoid shape. Izuku's own avatar materialized in the other chair. He remained silent. "Thank you for coming, Daedalus," a calm, female voice said, emanating from the other avatar. It was clear, synthesized, but with a warm undertone. "Or should I say, Midoriya-kun?" Izuku's heart stopped. They knew his name. He was truly exposed. "Who is this?" he demanded, his voice coming out as a flat, digitized tone. "My name is Melissa Shield." The blank avatar dissolved, replaced by a photorealistic rendering of a young woman with blonde hair and intelligent, determined blue eyes. The name hit him like a physical blow. Shield. David Shield was a living legend, the world's foremost inventor of support technology, All Might's closest friend. And this was his daughter. "I am the head of research and development at Shield Industries on Island," she continued. "And like you, Midoriya-kun, I am quirkless. And like you, I believe that is irrelevant. What matters is what we build." This wasn't the HPSC. This wasn't a trap. This was something else entirely. "How did you find me?" he asked, the question feeling inadequate. "You left a trail of brilliant breadcrumbs. I simply had the resources to follow it," she said with a smile. "I am not here to expose you. I'm here to empower you. Your work, what you're doing as the Ghost, is proof of concept for a theory I've had for years, that a system of integrated, predictive technology can be more effective at saving lives than 100 heroes with powerful quirks." She spoke his own philosophy back to him, the core belief he had forged in the wreckage of his dreams 2.5 years ago. "I have the full backing of Shield Industries," Melissa said, her expression turning serious. "My father is cautious, but he sees the potential. We want to fund you. Not as an employee. As a founder. We will provide the capital, the lab space, the materials, and the legal framework for you to establish your own company. A startup dedicated to pushing the boundaries of hero support technology, with you as its CEO and lead designer." Izuku was speechless. The offer was beyond anything he could have ever imagined. It was the key to unlocking his full potential, a shortcut of a decade's worth of solitary work. "Why?" he finally managed to ask. "Why me? Because you've already done the impossible," Melissa replied, her voice filled with genuine admiration. "You did it with scraps, from your bedroom, with no help and no recognition. I can't even begin to imagine what you could do with a real budget. This isn't charity, Midoriya-kun. This is the single best investment I can possibly make in the future of heroism." He took off the headset, the stark reality of his workshop flooding his senses. Mei was looking at him, her eyes wide with 1,000 questions. He looked at his drones. He looked at his code. He looked at the limitations that surrounded him. And then he looked at the future Melissa Shield was offering him. It was a risk. But the greatest risk was doing nothing. He put the headset back on. "What are the terms?" he asked, his voice no longer that of a vigilante, but of a businessman. 2 weeks later, the sign was mounted on the door of a modest, rented warehouse in an industrial district on the outskirts of Muzudafu, Midoria Industries. The name felt heavy, audacious. It was a declaration. The name he had once been taught to associate with weakness was now a brand. His brand. The inside of the warehouse was a chaotic work in progress. Crates of high-end components shipped directly from Ireland were stacked against the walls. A state-of-the-art fabrication unit, including a CNC mill and a 3D carbon fiber printer, sat in the center of the room, May buzzing around it like it was the greatest gift she had ever received. With the first round of seed money from Shield Industries, Izuku had officially incorporated. He brought May on as his head of research development, with a generous salary and an almost unlimited budget for her babies. He was the CEO, the architect, and she was his engine of creation. Their first priority was legitimacy. They couldn't operate as a Black Ops RD firm for a vigilante. They needed a public face, a product they could sell openly. The solution was simple. They refined their non-lethal containment devices. The foam grenade became the M.I. C.F.G. Aegis foam grenade, and the EMP net became the Zeus net capture system. They were clean, effective, and relatively affordable. Their target market wasn't the top 10 heroes, who already had exclusive contracts with massive support companies. They targeted the smaller, independent hero agencies, the ones operating on shoestring budgets. Their first sale was to the Hero Manual, a kind man with a versatile but not overwhelming quirk, who was overjoyed at the prospect of affordable, effective capture tech for him and his sidekicks. The sale was small, but it was a crucial first step. It put Midoria Industries on the map as a legitimate business, but the public products were only the beginning. The true work, the real reason for all of this, was happening in the back of the warehouse, in a secure room that required Izuku's biometric scan to enter. Project Aegis. On a large holographic display table, the blueprints for his magnum opus were laid out in glowing lines of green light. It was the Aegis Power Suit Mark I. It's not an attack suit, Izuku explained to May as they worked, him refining the software while she calibrated the microservos in the suit's joints. I'm not trying to build something to fight villains hand to hand. That's inefficient. So it's not for punching bad guys into next week? May asked, peering at a wiring conduit through a magnifying lens. No, Izuku confirmed. It's a mobile command and control center. A nexus. The suit's primary function is to allow the wearer to operate safely in a hostile environment, while commanding the real weapons, the drones, the automated systems, the Legion. The suit itself was sleek and practical, designed with lightweight, impact-resistant ceramic composites, not heavy steel plating. Its purpose was defense and endurance. The helmet contained a sophisticated heads-up display, linking directly to all sight and the entire drone fleet, allowing him to see through a dozen pairs of eyes at once. The gauntlets weren't for punching, they were advanced control interfaces, allowing him to deploy and command his technology with simple hand gestures. The suit's power core, a miniaturized marvel designed by Melissa and fabricated by May, could run the suit's systems and a full squadron of drones for 12 hours straight. It was the ultimate expression of his philosophy. The suit didn't give him a quirk. It amplified his greatest weapon, his mind. One evening, Izuku stood alone in the quiet warehouse, the hum of the servers a comforting backdrop. He looked at the first completed piece of the Aegis suit, the chest plate, a sleek, dark green plate bearing the simple, stylized logo of his new company. He was no longer the ghost, a phantom hiding in the dark. He was Izuku Midoriya, CEO. He had a patron, a partner, and a purpose that was clearer than ever. He had stepped out of the shadows, not into the blinding light of traditional heroism, but into the focused, brilliant glow of his own forge. The dream he'd had as a child was dead, but the resolve that had replaced it had built something far more real, far more powerful. An empire, not of adulation, but of application, not of power, but of protection, and he was just getting started. The low, persistent hum of the Midoriya Industries warehouse was the symphony of Izuku's new life. It was a chorus of server fans, CNC mills, and the crackle of May Hatsum's arc welder, and to Izuku, it was more soothing than any music. 6 months of relentless work, fueled by Shield Industries' capital and May's manic genius, had transformed the empty space into a bastion of next-generation technology. The public-facing side of the business was thriving. Their Aegis foam grenades and Zeus net capture systems had become standard-issue equipment for over a dozen smaller hero agencies, providing a steady stream of revenue and, more importantly, a veneer of legitimacy. But the true work, the heart of the Iron Empire, was their biggest and most audacious contract yet, UA High School. It had been Principal Nizu who had reached out. The hyper-intelligent creature had somehow, through his own mysterious channels, become aware of the new tech startup and its brilliant, quirkless founder. He hadn't asked about the ghost of Muzutafu. He hadn't needed to. Instead, he had invited Izuku to a meeting, a terrifying, exhilarating chess match of intellects where Nizu had laid out his concerns. UA, for all its prestige, was a target. Its security was top of the line, but it was conventional. Nizu wanted something more. He wanted a proactive, intelligent, and unconventional security and emergency response system. Izuku had shown him the schematics for what he called the Strategos protocol. It wasn't a simple alarm system. It was a comprehensive, AI-driven network. Over the past 3 months, under the guise of a campus-wide communications upgrade, Izuku and Mei had secretly integrated their technology throughout the UA campus. They had installed hundreds of microdrones, no bigger than insects, into the walls and ceilings. They had placed compact, retractable hard light shield emitters at key strategic choke points. They had networked the school's security cameras and sensors directly into all sites' predictive algorithms. The contract was clear. Midoria Industries was not providing a hero service. They were providing a contingency response system. In the event of a catastrophic communications failure combined with a security breach, the Strategos protocol would activate autonomously, providing reconnaissance, civilian protection, and tactical support data to faculty until conventional hero forces could arrive. It was a failsafe for a worst-case scenario. Izuku prayed every day that it would never be used. Today, as he calibrated the targeting software for a new squadron of Watcher 7 drones, that worst-case scenario was the furthest thing from his mind. It was a normal Tuesday. Mei was attempting to build a high-velocity burrito cannon. For emergency meal delivery, architect! It's vital! And the biggest alert on his screen was a notification that Class 1A of the UA Hero Course was on a field trip. They're going to the unforeseen simulation joint today, he commented idly, watching the bus's GPS tracker move across his map of the city. Rescue training? Ooh. That's my classmate Tenya Ida's class. Mei chirped from across the room, her safety goggles pushed up into her pink hair. He's so serious. Always talking about rules and regulations. You'd like him, Mido-kun. You're both sticks in the mud. Izuku didn't respond. He felt a faint, vestigial pang of something he couldn't quite name. Envy? Regret? He watched the bus icon on the screen, a silent observer of a life he had once so desperately wanted. He saw Kaken's name on the class roster, a name that still carried the weight of a complicated history. He had chosen a different path, a better one, he knew. But still, a part of him wondered. He was pulled from his reverie by a sudden, jarring alarm. It wasn't loud or flashy. It was a single, insistent, crimson icon that began flashing on his main display. Strategos protocol, triggered. Location, unforeseen simulation joint. Condition 1, catastrophic communications failure confirmed. Condition 2, multiple unauthorized entries confirmed. Status, activating assets. The blood drained from his face. Mei's burrito cannon clattered to the floor. Architect? She asked, her voice losing its usual cheer. It's real, Izuku said, his voice a low, focused whisper. His entire body went cold, then hot with a surge of pure adrenaline. This was it. The ultimate test. There were children in there. Students. Kaken. He slammed his hand down on a large, red button on his console, initiating a lockdown of their own facility. Steel shutters rolled down over the windows. Spark, get to your station. I need full power diverted to the UA network relay. I want every drone in that facility active and reporting 5 seconds ago. You got it! Mei was already in her chair, her fingers flying across her keyboard, her playful demeanor gone, replaced by the sharp focus of a master engineer. Izuku's hands moved with a speed and precision born of thousands of hours of practice. He brought the USJ onto his main holographic display. A three-dimensional, wireframe model of the massive dome appeared, built from the blueprints Nizu had provided. All sight, give me a full tactical overlay. I want every camera, every sensor, every heat signature. Go. The dome began to populate with icons. 2 large blue icons near the entrance, 13 and Shota Aizawa. 20 smaller blue icons clustered behind them, the students of Class 1A, and then, the red icons began to appear. Dozens of them, pouring out of a swirling purple vortex in the central plaza. Hostiles confirmed, he said, his voice grim. Massive numbers. This is a coordinated, large-scale attack. His contract was to provide support to faculty. But the faculty was outnumbered 50 to 1. This wasn't a situation that called for passive observation. This required direct, decisive action. He was the only one who could see the entire battlefield. He was the only one who could act now. He slid on his lightweight command headset. This is Architect. Stratego's protocol is now under my direct command. All automated responses are overridden. Spark, get ready to deploy the shield emitters on my mark. I'm sending in the swarm. With a final command, he unleashed his ghosts. From hidden compartments all over the USJ's massive ceiling, 100 insect-sized stealth drones detached themselves and descended, their optical camouflage making them virtually invisible to the naked eye. The real-time tactical map on his display exploded with information, each drone feeding him a different angle, a different data stream. He could hear the villain's speech through the drone's audio sensors, something about All Might. They were here for the symbol of peace. And they were willing to kill children to get to him. Aizawa is engaging, Izuku reported, his eyes locked on the icon of the Erasure hero as he leaped into the fray. He watched Aizawa fight, a whirlwind of capture weapon and quirk-erasing stares. He was brilliant. He was a master of his craft. But he was just one man. They're trying to scatter the students, Izuku observed as a warp gate villain appeared. Divide and conquer. Smart. He watched as the students were warped to different zones within the facility. His map instantly updated, tracking their locations. Most were in small groups, beset by villains. Okay, Spark. Phase 1. Protect the innocent. He highlighted the students who remained at the entrance with 13. Deploy shields. Now, my babies are on it. At the USJ, as the mist villain Kurojairi turned his attention back to the remaining students, the floor panels in front of them hissed open. Sleek, metallic pillars rose up and, with a hum of energy, projected a wall of shimmering, translucent hard light. The impenetrable barrier formed a protective semicircle around the terrified students and the injured 13. Kurojairi recoiled, his misty form sputtering in surprise. What is this? This is not part of the facility's design. Back in the warehouse, Izuku was already focused on the next problem. Aizawa. He was being overwhelmed. A large, brutish villain was about to land a crushing blow on him from behind. Watcher 56 Sonic Pulse. 2-second burst. Go. At the USJ, an invisible drone hovering near the fight emitted a high-frequency blast. The villain screamed, clutching his ears, his attack forgotten. Aizawa, without missing a beat, used the opening to slam the man's face into the ground. Izuku became a conductor of a symphony of chaos. He was everywhere at once. In the shipwreck zone, where Tsuyu Azuri, Mineta, and him were cornered, he used the drone to create a high-pitched auditory illusion, drawing a handful of villains away from their boat. In the mountain zone, where Yayorozu and Jiro were fighting, he highlighted a structurally weak rock formation on their HUDs, a feature only he could provide via his drones, allowing them to trigger a small landslide to incapacitate their opponents. He was fighting a new kind of war. A war of information and tactical advantage. He wasn't throwing punches. He was changing the very geometry of the battlefield. But his attention was drawn back to the central plaza. To Aizawa. To the main villains. A lanky man covered in dismembered hands, and a monstrous, bird-like creature. The Noma. He watched in horror as the Noma caught Aizawa, breaking his limbs with sickening crunches. His drones were support units, not combatants. They had no weapons. He couldn't stop it. The raw, brutal power of the creature was something his system was not designed to counter directly. He felt a surge of that old, familiar helplessness. But he crushed it with cold, hard logic. He couldn't save Aizawa from his fate, but he could use this. He could gather data. All sight. He commanded, his voice tight. Focus every available sensor on the large hostile. Full spectrum analysis. I want to know everything about it. Its biology, its energy output, its fighting style, everything. As the Nomu brutalized Aizawa, Izuku's drones swarmed around it at a distance, their sensors glowing faintly as they bombarded it with everything from particle beams to radar waves, analyzing the feedback. Data flooded his servers. The doors to the USJ burst open. A figure stood there, not smiling. All Might had arrived, but he arrived to a scene that was both better and worse than he could have imagined. Worse, because Aizawa was grievously injured. Better, because the students were largely safe and accounted for, and the villains were confused and disorganized, having been harried by an unseen, unknown force. All Might moved in a blur, taking out the low-level thugs and securing Aizawa. He stood before the three main antagonists, Shigaraki, Kurogyari, and the Noma. It's no good, Izuku muttered, watching the initial confrontation. His fighting style is all wrong for this opponent. The fight began, a clash of titans. All Might threw punch after punch, but the Noma absorbed them, its body showing no signs of damage. It's a shock absorption quirk, Mei said from her station. Like a superpowered cushion. No, Izuku said, his eyes glued to the data streaming in from all sight. The AI was cross-referencing the sensor readings with 1 billion different data points from quirk registration databases and scientific papers. Patterns were emerging. It's not absorption. It's redistribution. Look at the kinetic energy readings. The force isn't vanishing, it's being shunted, somewhere. It's not a nullification quirk. It's a processing quirk. And any processor has a limit. He knew, with a sudden, chilling certainty, how to beat it. But he had no way to tell All Might. He was a ghost in the machine. All Might was trapped, the Noma's powerful grip holding him in a bloody embrace, its claws digging into his old wound. His time was running out. The steam was beginning to pour from his body. Izuku made a decision. It was a colossal risk. It would expose his existence, if not his identity. He didn't care. Spark, I need a direct, open comms line. Right now. Find a frequency the villains can't jam. Bounce it off our own satellite relays. Patch it directly into All Might's earpiece if you can hack it. If not, just broadcast it. That's risky, Architect. They'll know someone else is here. They already know that. Izuku shot back. Just do it. He watched as All Might struggled, his desperation palpable even through the grainy drone footage. The comms link chirped in his ear. It was live. He took a deep breath, and pressed the transmit button. He ran his voice through 3 different scramblers, turning it into a cold, synthetic, and completely anonymous tone. All Might. Can you hear me? At the USJ, All Might's eyes widened. A voice. Clear as a bell in his ear, cutting through the chaos. Where was it coming from? This is Strategos. The voice said, calm and impossibly authoritative. The enemy's quirk is not shock absorption. It is kinetic redistribution. It has a finite processing threshold. You cannot wear it down, you must overwhelm it. All Might grunted in pain as the Noma's claws dug deeper. Overwhelm it? He was already giving it everything he had. Your single impacts are too powerful but too slow. The synthetic voice continued, as if reading his thoughts. The hostile is processing and redistributing the kinetic force of each blow before the next one lands. You need to exceed its processing speed. Successive impacts. Faster and harder. Go beyond. Plus ultra. Now All Might. The word struck him like a physical blow. The strategy. It was flawless. It was the kind of cold, precise analysis he had once seen in the notebooks of a hopeful, quirkless boy on a rooftop. A fire ignited in his gut. Hope. He had a strategy. He had a chance. You're right! He roared, a genuine, booming laugh escaping his lips. He pushed back against the Noma, his muscles screaming. Thanks for that, Strategos. Whoever you are, he began to punch. Not just single, powerful smashes, but a relentless, piston-like barrage. Fists moving so fast they became a blur. Each blow was slightly weaker than his signature smashes, but they came with a furious, overwhelming rhythm. 100%. The Nomu, for the first time, began to falter. It couldn't redistribute the energy fast enough. The blows were coming too quickly. The system was overloading. Cracks began to appear on its dark skin. A real hero. All Might bellowed, his fists a storm of righteous fury. We'll always find a way to break out of a tough spot, he reared back, channeling every last ember of One for All into his fist. Plus! Ultra! The final blow connected with a sound like the world cracking in two. It wasn't just a punch, it was the culmination of 100 punches, a tidal wave of kinetic energy that the Noma's system simply could not process. The creature was launched backward, tearing through the roof of the dome and disappearing into the sky. The resulting shockwave blew the remaining villains off their feet. Shigaraki stared, his single visible eye wide with disbelief. He cheated. The villain rasped, scratching furiously at his neck. Someone was helping him. In the warehouse, Izuku and Mei watched in stunned silence. A cheer erupted from Mei's station. We did it! You did it, Architect! You saved All Might! Izuku couldn't speak. He just watched, his heart hammering against his ribs. He had done it. From a chair in a warehouse miles away, he had helped the symbol of peace win a fight he was losing. The other heroes arrived, the battle was over. As the police began to round up the villains, Izuku initiated the final phase of the protocol. The drones ascended, recamouflaging themselves in their ceiling compartments. The hard light shields deactivated, sinking back into the floor. Within minutes, every trace of Midoria Industries' presence had vanished. All that remained was the outcome. Later, as the sun began to set, the dust had settled at the USJ. The students were safe, if shaken. The villains were in custody. Aizawa was on his way to the hospital. All Might, now in his skeletal form, stood with Principal Nizu and Detective Tsukachi near the entrance of the shattered dome. This Strategos, you're sure you have no idea who it was? Tsukachi asked, his brow furrowed. None, All Might admitted, his voice raspy. The voice was synthesized. The tactical support was inhuman. It saw everything. It helped the students evade capture, it supported Aizawa, and it gave me the key to defeating that monster. Without it, I'm not sure I would have won today. The admission felt like swallowing glass. Nizu, perched on Tsukachi's shoulder, sipped his tea. A faint, knowing smile played on his muzzle. It seems our new security system performed above and beyond its design specifications. A most worthy investment. Tsukachi looked at the principal. You know who it is, don't you? I know that I hired a brilliant new tech firm to upgrade our emergency response protocols. Nizu said evasively. Their work, as you can see, is quite effective. All Might wasn't listening. He was staring out at the wreckage, his mind replaying the voice, the strategy, the cold, brilliant logic. It has a finite processing threshold. You must overwhelm it. It was a level of analysis that was terrifyingly familiar. He remembered a rooftop. A skinny, tear-streaked boy with green hair, clutching a notebook. A boy whose dreams he had crushed. Hero Analysis for the Future, he remembered the title. The pages had been filled with exactly this kind of insight. Brilliant, incisive, and utterly practical, young man, he had told him. You have to be realistic. A cold dread, mingled with a sliver of impossible hope, washed over him. The strategic mind he had so carelessly dismissed that day. Could it be the same one that had just saved him and an entire class of students? A quirkless boy. A name he hadn't allowed himself to think about for years. A name now seared into his memory. Midoriya. He looked up at the sky where the Noma had vanished, a profound, world-altering question echoing in the depths of his soul. What had he done? And what, in his absence, had that boy become? The aftermath of the USJ incident was a seismic event that sent shockwaves through the foundations of Heroes Society. To the public, it was a story of terror and triumph, a brazen attack by a new league of villains, thwarted by the indomitable will of All Might and the courage of the UA's students. The media spun a narrative of heroic resilience, focusing on the dramatic final battle and the reassuring presence of the symbol of peace. But within the hushed corridors of power, a different story was being told. The UA, faculty, the Hero Public Safety Commission, and the top pro-heroes all saw the unedited security footage, and they saw the anomalies. They saw hard light shields springing from nowhere to protect students. They saw villains in different zones being thwarted by seemingly random environmental events. And they all heard the recording of the cold, synthetic voice that had guided All Might to victory. They didn't know the who or the how, but they knew the what, an unknown, third-party entity with unprecedented tactical and technological capabilities had intervened. The name Strategos was no longer a whispered rumor. It was a priority intelligence target. For Izuku Midoriya, the days following the incident were a blur of frenetic activity. He and Mei worked for 72 hours straight, fueled by caffeine and the lingering adrenaline of their success. They combed through every scrap of data from the USJ, analyzing their performance, identifying weaknesses, and planning the next generation of their technology. The Strategos protocol had worked beyond his wildest dreams, but to Izuku, it was just a prototype. A proof of concept. Now, it was time to scale up. The hard light emitters were effective, but their power consumption is too high and the deployment speed is a half-second too slow, he dictated, pacing in front of a holographic schematic while Mei furiously soldered a new power conduit. We need to switch to a compressed photon emitter design. It'll be more stable and 20% faster. And the microdrones, their camouflage was perfect, but their sensor range is limited. I want the next generation, the Spectre series, to have integrated LiDAR and multi-spectrum scanning. You want to pack a LiDAR array into a chassis the size of a thumbnail? Mei asked, not with skepticism, but with the glee of a mountain climber facing a new, impossible peak. Ooh, that's a spicy challenge. I love it. I'll need to invent a whole new microfabrication process. While Mei was losing herself in the joy of creation, Izuku was focused on the grander strategy. The USJ incident had given him an invaluable treasure trove of data, but it had also started a clock. His anonymity was a rapidly depleting resource. He had to move faster. The offer came from an unexpected source. A consortium of municipal governments, led by the forward-thinking mayor of the neighboring Hosa city, approached Midoria Industries. The news of UA's miraculous new emergency response system had leaked through official channels. They didn't know the specifics, but they knew it had worked. With crime rates on the rise and public confidence in heroes wavering after the attack, they were desperate for a new solution. They offered Izuku a municipal contract of staggering proportions to design and implement a city-wide, automated emergency response network. It was the opportunity he had been waiting for. This was his chance to implement his philosophy on a macro scale, to turn an entire city into a testament to his vision. He accepted. Thus began the true construction of the Iron Empire. Over the next few months, Mizotafu and then Hosu began to change. The transformation was subtle at first, almost unnoticeable to the average citizen. Small, sleek, dark green towers, no taller than a standard lamppost, began to appear on street corners and rooftops. They were unobtrusive, designed to blend into the urban landscape. These were the Aegis Towers, the physical nodes of Izuku's network. Each tower was a masterpiece of compact, multifunctional engineering. They housed a suite of sensors that constantly monitored the environment, air quality, seismic activity, radiation levels. They served as communication hubs, creating a private, encrypted data network that blanketed the city. But their primary purpose was active response. Concealed within each tower were automated systems for fire suppression, capable of deploying targeted bursts of flame-retardant foam with pinpoint accuracy. They held medical supply drones that could be dispatched to an accident scene, arriving with defibrillators and trauma kits minutes before a human paramedic could navigate traffic. And most importantly, they were equipped with the latest generation of his non-lethal containment technology. The public, initially wary of the new surveillance infrastructure, was quickly won over by the results. A kitchen fire in a high-rise apartment was extinguished by an Aegis tower before the fire department had even left their station, saving the building and the family inside. During a multi-car pile-up on a major highway, a swarm of medical drones stabilized the critically injured victims long enough for help to arrive. A bank robbery was thwarted not by a hero, but by a tower that deployed a hard light barrier over the entrance, trapping the robbers inside until the police arrived. Midoria Industries became a household name. News reports hailed Izuku, whose public profile was that of a reclusive, quirkless tech prodigy, as a visionary. They called his network the Iron Empire, a term coined by a journalist that captured the public's imagination. It was an empire of steel, code, and unblinking efficiency, and it was making people feel safe in a way they hadn't for years. The approval rating for his system skyrocketed. For many, the quiet hum of an Aegis tower was more reassuring than the flashy patrol of a pro-hero. Izuku cared little for the fame. He poured every yen of profit back into research and development, expanding his drone fleet and refining Allsight's predictive algorithms. He and May moved their operation to a much larger, more secure facility, a veritable fortress of innovation. He was building his system, proving his point. He was saving people, but in the gleaming, sterile halls of the Hero Public Safety Commission headquarters, his success was viewed not as a triumph, but as a terrifying threat. The president of the HPSC, a woman with iron-gray hair and eyes that held the cold certainty of absolute authority, stared at the large screen in the commission's central briefing room. The screen showed a dozen different news reports, all lauding the effectiveness of the Iron Empire. "He's created a private, unregulated army of machines," she stated, her voice devoid of emotion. "He has more surveillance assets in Hosa City than the entire police force. His response time to civilian-level incidents now averages 94 seconds. The highest-rated hero agency in that city averages 6 minutes. The other commissioners shifted in their seats. The numbers were undeniable. "The public loves him," one of them pointed out. "His approval ratings are higher than Endeavor's. We can't just shut him down." "I am not talking about shutting him down," the president replied coolly. "I am talking about control. Heroism in this country is a state-sanctioned, state-regulated monopoly. It is the pillar upon which our society rests. We will not allow a quirkless teenager to build a parallel system outside of our authority." Her gaze flickered to another file on the screen, this one marked with the highest level of classification. It contained the Commission's own analysis of the USJ incident, and their investigation into Strategos. "We know Midoriya is Strategos," she said. "The circumstantial evidence is overwhelming. He is a vigilante who has inserted himself into the very fabric of our infrastructure. He commands a level of power that is completely untethered from our laws, from our chain of command. What happens when his predictive AI flags a potential threat that turns out to be a false positive? What happens when one of his drones makes a mistake and a civilian is harmed? Who is held accountable? Him? His algorithm?" She leaned forward, her hands clasped on the polished table. "He is a disruption. A dangerous variable in a carefully balanced equation. We must either bring him under our control, or we must eliminate him as a factor." The order was given. Midoria Industries was to be placed under intense scrutiny. Their finances, their supply chains, their communications, everything was to be monitored. They would find a weakness, a misstep, and they would use it to either force him to submit to the HPSC's authority, or to dismantle his empire piece by piece. The commission could not abide a second king on the board. Katsuki Bakugo was not a fool. He was arrogant, aggressive, and had the emotional subtlety of a detonating grenade, but he was far from stupid. His instincts were sharp, honed by a lifetime of combat, and an unyielding drive to be the best. And his instincts were screaming at him that something was wrong. The USJ incident had shaken him to his core. Not the fear of the villains he had felt that, but had buried it under layers of rage. No, what truly disturbed him was the feeling of being a pawn in a much larger game. The hard-light shield that had protected them, the strange, localized phenomena that had helped his classmates, the way All Might had suddenly, inexplicably known the Noma's weakness. There had been a guiding hand, an invisible intelligence manipulating the battle, and then there was this Iron Empire. These towers, these drones, this company that had sprung from nowhere, run by some faceless tech nerd. It was too efficient, too perfect. It grated on his nerves. Heroes were supposed to be the ones saving people, with overwhelming power and grit. Not machines. The final piece of the puzzle clicked into place during a conversation in the Class 1A common room. "Did you guys see the news about that new support company, Midoria Industries?" Kaminari asked, scrolling through his phone. The name hit Bakugo like a physical blow. "Midoriya. Isn't that a common name?" Kirishima asked. "Yeah, but the founder is this super genius quirkless kid," Kaminari continued. Built the whole thing from the ground up. Total recluse, apparently. Bakugo's blood ran cold. Quirkless. Super genius. The words echoed with the ghost of a memory he had tried his best to suppress. A scrawny, green-haired kid, always scribbling in those creepy notebooks, analyzing heroes with a terrifying, obsessive clarity. A kid who had the audacity to try and save him from the sludge villain, despite being powerless. Deku. It couldn't be. It was impossible. The useless, sniveling crybaby he had known his whole life couldn't be the architect of a technological empire that was upstaging pro-heroes. The idea was so ludicrous, so utterly offensive to his worldview, that he almost dismissed it out of hand. Almost. But the suspicion was a splinter in his mind, and it festered. He started digging. He spent his nights not just training, but researching. He used his burgeoning fame as a UA student to access news archives and public records. He cross-referenced the first reported sightings of the ghost of Muzurifu with the timeline. It started about 2 years ago, right after they had both graduated from middle school. Right after All Might had crushed Deku's dream on that rooftop. He remembered Deku's application to CI Academy, a move that had shocked everyone. He had assumed the nerd had just given up. But what if he hadn't? What if he had just changed his strategy? The final confirmation came when he saw an obscure business filing for the initial incorporation of Midoria Industries. The name of the head of RD was listed as Mei Hatsum. Bakugo remembered her from the sports festival. The crazy pink-haired girl from the support course, with her wild, powerful inventions. A girl from UA. The connection was tenuous, but in his gut, Bakugo knew. He knew with an infuriating certainty. The useless Deku he had tormented and dismissed his entire life had built his own form of power. A power that didn't rely on quirks, on strength, on the things Bakugo had always believed were the only things that mattered. And it was working. That was the part that galled him the most. It was working so well that it was changing the world. He had to see him. He had to confront this ghost from his past. He found the address of the main Midoria Industries facility easily enough. Getting inside was another matter. The place was a fortress. But he didn't try to sneak in. He walked up to the front gate and announced himself. 10 minutes later, the gate slid open. He was being invited in. The interior of the facility was vast and clinical, a hive of activity. Engineers and programmers moved with quiet purpose, and autonomous robotic arms assembled complex machinery. It was overwhelming. But Bakugo's eyes were locked on the figure standing in the center of the main workshop, his back to him. He was taller now, his posture straight and confident. He wore a simple black jumpsuit, the uniform of his company. When he turned, Bakugo's breath caught in his throat. It was Deku. But it wasn't. The freckles were the same, the unruly green-black hair was the same. But the eyes were different. The wide, fearful eyes of the boy he had known were gone. In their place was a calm, analytical gaze that held no trace of fear. It was the look of a general surveying a battlefield, of a king surveying his domain. There was no worship, no terror, no recognition of Bakugo's own power. There was just assessment. Kaken, Izuku said, his voice even and steady. It was not the name of a victim, but the simple statement of a fact. I was wondering when you would figure it out. The casual confidence infuriated Bakugo. He stomped forward, his palms beginning to spark. Deku! What the hell is all this? You think you can play hero with these stupid toys? They're not toys, Izuku replied, his voice never rising. He gestured to the vast workshop around them. They're the solution. You were at the USJ. You saw the pro heroes a UA teacher and a rescue specialist fail. You saw All Might struggle against a single, engineered opponent. The system you're so desperate to be the number one of is fundamentally flawed. It's inefficient, reactive, and dangerously reliant on a handful of individuals. So what? Bakugo snarled. That's why we train. To be strong enough to win anyway. And what if you're not strong enough? Izuku countered, taking a step closer. For the first time, Bakugo realized he wasn't flinching. He wasn't cowering. He was meeting his gaze head-on. What if the opponent is a natural counter to your quirk? What if there are too many of them? What if you're in the wrong place at the wrong time? Your quirk is a tool, Kaken. A powerful one, I admit, but it is just one tool. I'm building the entire toolbox. He pointed to a large monitor displaying a real-time map of Hosa City, dotted with hundreds of green icons representing his assets. While you're at UA learning how to punch villains, my system is preventing robberies before they happen. It's dispatching aid to car accidents. It's monitoring for fires and gas leaks. It's saving more lives in a single day through quiet, efficient prevention than most pro heroes do in a month of loud, destructive combat. Every word was a perfectly aimed blow, striking not at Bakugo's body, but at the core of his ideology. You think power is about the size of your explosions? Izuku continued, his voice dropping to a low, intense level. You can blow up a building, Kaken. That's your power. Destruction. He gestured again to the map, to the pulsing network of data and machinery that was his creation. I can build a system that makes sure no one is in it when you do. The silence that followed was heavy, crackling with unspoken history. Bakugo's hands were smoking now, his rage a physical presence in the room. He wanted to scream, to lash out, to blast that infuriatingly calm look off Deku's face. He wanted to prove that his power, the power he had been born with and had honed his entire life, was superior. But he couldn't, because he knew, on some deep, terrifying level, that Deku was right. He saw the truth in the cold, hard logic. He had witnessed it at the USJ. Power wasn't just about explosions. It was about control. And the quirkless, useless Deku he had built his own identity on surpassing now had more control, more genuine influence over the world, than he could ever dream of. You're still just a quirkless nobody. Bakugo spat, the words feeling hollow and childish even to his own ears. It was all he had left. Izuku's expression didn't change. The insult, which once would have shattered him, now glanced off him like a pebble off a battleship. Yes, Izuku said, and the simple affirmation was the most devastating blow of all. I am. And I'm changing the world. What are you doing, Kaken? Besides learning how to punch harder? With nothing left to say, nothing left to do, Bakugo turned and stormed out of the facility. He didn't look back. He walked through the gates of the Iron Empire, leaving its king standing unharmed and unchallenged in the heart of his power. He was an engine of destruction leaving a fortress of creation, and he had never felt so powerless in his entire life. The world was changing, and he was terrified that it was leaving him behind.